India just announced a big nuclear missile test, and they made absolutely clear that it was a missile that could reach China, it could reach Shanghai and Beijing, and its purpose was deterrence. Do you think that we're witnessing the beginnings of a kind of Asian arms race?
I think we're already in the Asian arms race. I mean, India could have chosen to conduct this Agni 5 missile test at any stage in the last 2-3 years. The timing of this is quite interesting, though, given the fact that, you know, China, it does have a more assertive role in the last 2 years, but China's also in a transition phase. And I think you have a weak government in India, and this is one way of showing that it's still got strength, can flex its muscles. And of course, the Agni is the god of fire. It can reach Shanghai. For the first time, India is at a parity, therefore, in nuclear terms with China. And I suspect we're going to be seeing a lot more of this. I do suspect, though, as it has always been the case with an Indian test, whether it's a nuclear or a missile test, we're going to see some Pakistan version sometime in the very near future.
Well, what I find interesting about the test isn't so much what it says about India, it's what it says about China and really, I think, the failure of Chinese foreign policy over the past decade. I mean, now just in the last year, you've had Burma turn very sharply away from its Chinese patron towards the West. The Vietnamese next week will be conducting naval exercises with the United States. Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, the entire rim, Australia, where we're going to be deploying Marines, the entire Asian rim has decided that their fate isn't, or their future isn't better married to an ascendant China. It's containing the rise of a very aggressive and somewhat scary state.
And of course, all of these countries hold, well, most of these countries hold regular naval exercises and war games with India as well. India's relations with those around China's rim.
And they certainly do all with the United States. They all want the insurance policy of the U.S. Navy.
I don't disagree with you about China's failure, the failure of China's policy, but I don't think this was exactly a brilliant move for India's foreign policy. India does this right when we're in the midst of once again having talks with the Iranians, where they've been extremely unhelpful with respect to sanctions on the Iranians, and where we've got a real problem with North Korea again, and North Korea has just launched a rocket that fails. So just at this moment, India really needs to test
I think India is not Britain. That's the thing, and it keeps wanting to demonstrate that.
What does that mean?
That it's not going to be a global lieutenant of the United States. So there is no treaty there. And I mean, I understand your frustration. The timing is not helpful from an American point of view.
Your point being that we're winking at the Indian nuclear program while...
Or just that it makes it so much harder to talk to the Iranians or the North Koreans when they're pointing to another country that is, in fact, a nuclear power, that, of course, didn't sign the nuclear treaty, but that nevertheless is saying we can do it, just as it's got other countries around that want to say we, too, are on the global stage.
But it's actually a moment of clarity. I don't think anyone is going to go to sleep tonight lying awake thinking, oh my goodness, the Indians now have a new missile that can reach China. Why? Because India is basically a responsible and a very democratic power. That's the real issue here. We talk about our problems with Iran and North Korea as essentially legal problems that are potentially in breach of NPT. Our problems with these regimes is that they're awful regimes with barbarous intentions. And it might help clear up some thinking about the nature of proliferation when we say, you know, we don't really mind when India acquires this kind of capability. What we fear is an Iran or a North Korea doing it.
So, Brett, wait a minute. Why exactly was this wonderful, responsible power not willing to impose sanctions on Iran when everybody else is actually giving Iran a major out? I mean, if they're so great and they're so noble, and the Iranians
they don't want to be Britain, but they do like to be France. That is to say, there's a sort of Gaullist evasion.
I rest my case.
but we like France. Thank you. You could make the case also
let's hear from the Gaullist.
You could make the case that actually this missile was not aimed at China as much as the United States do, in terms of, you know, trying to say that they are power. And when you look, I'm following the UN here in New York, among other things, and when you look at what the India is doing in the Security Council, they've been in the Security Council for 1 year, and they align themselves with China, not with the US. the ambassador, the Indian ambassador at the Security Council on Syria, is actually the most defendant of
He's the most pro-Syrian.
pro-Syrian ambassador among the 15. Even even the Russian ambassador is not sometimes. So yes, they are on, maybe they're not going to use their nuclear bomb against the U.S. But they're not aligning themselves.
It's an
with the
extraordinary
US.
measure of how much the U.S. wants India's friendship that it now backs India's permanent membership of the UN Security Council, even though it has a voting record against U.S. resolutions, bar none, I think. And I might be wrong, there's probably Cuba and a few others, but India is pretty high up
The problem for
there.
Brett is all good things don't go together. You get a wonderful
Exactly
democracy,
right.
but its foreign policy is lawless, to say the
Even if
least.
they oppose us on the tactical, the values of the state are basically consonant with American ones, and we can live with our differences, our diplomatic ones, even if they're
So now you
sharp.
grudgingly we're willing to say that, in fact, France's independence is a great thing.
France's independence is a marvelous thing. I wish our separate prosperity.
On that note of Franco-American friendship, Brett Stevens, Emmanuel St. Martin, Ed Luz.